Are you ready for some real chills? In this series, we'll be exploring a collection of genuine accounts of the paranormal. These are chilling stories shared by people who have personally encountered unexplained phenomena. Story 1. My mentally ill neighbor turned out to be a serial killer. Posted by Unknown. When I was a kid, I used to live with my parents in a small town. There were only about 70 to 80 people living there at that time. I remember the good times I had with my friends, being outside all day, playing different games and getting in trouble. Our favorite game was Ding Dong Ditch. We used to terrorize our neighbors that way. Our neighbors were kind, friendly people, but there was one neighbor, everybody was scared of him. He was mentally ill, and our parents warned us not to mess with him and to stay away from his house. His name was Martin, and he was about 35 years old at that time. Martin was really creepy. He used to get out of his house in the middle of the night and sneak into people's backyards and just look through windows and make creepy noises. One time he came to my house and my dad caught him and ran out of the house to confront him, but he didn't catch him. The next day my dad went to his house and said to him that he would come near my house again and that he would kill him. After that, every time Martin saw me outside, he would smile at me in a creepy way, and I remember being terrified of him. When I was 18 years old, I moved out of my parents' house and I started living alone. I found a job in the city as a security guard in a nightclub that was about 4h away from my parents' house, so I needed to move there. All my friends stayed in the city where we grew up. 5 years passed. Some of my friends that were older than me got married. Some of them got kids, including my best childhood friend Steven. One day I texted Steven that I will be in town because I got some time off due to an injury I got while working one night in the club. Some drunk guy hit me with a beer bottle and made a small cut on the back of my head, but it was nothing that bad that I couldn't work. I just used the situation to get some time off and go back and visit my parents and my friends. The next day I went to see my parents and spent some time with them. We had lunch together, and I went to see Steven. He lived just a few houses from mine. When I got there, we grabbed some beers and went to his backyard to hang out. He seemed happy to see me, but something was wrong. I could see it in his eyes, so I asked him what's wrong. He said it was nothing special, but I made him tell me. His wife left him for some other guy and left him and his daughter. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He never mentioned it when we spoke on the phone or texted, and we did that a lot. He said that it's not the only problem. He needs to go to a town that's 6h away from our town for a job interview because he lost his job here and that he needed to move there if he gets a job there. He said that he had something to ask me but was embarrassed. I told him to ask me and that I would do everything for him. He asked me to babysit his daughter Emma for 2 days, while he was away because he can't bring her with him. I said no problem, and then we continued drinking beer and having fun. Steven told me to come to his house tomorrow at 7 a.m. The next morning I came to his house. Steven was waiting for me in front of his house with Emma. I said hello to Emma and Steven explained to her that I will be babysitting her for the next 2 days while he was out of town. She seemed really happy about that. I could see that Steven was worried, but I assured him that everything was going to be alright. He kissed Emma and then went. That day the weather was beautiful. First we went to the park, then we went to my parents' house for lunch. It was getting dark, so I told Emma that it's time to go home. On our way home I was holding Emma's hand, and I was looking at my phone texting Steven about our day. I was talking to Emma, and I was still looking at my phone when I felt Emma squeezed my hand harder and stopped talking, so I looked up. I saw Martin. I haven't seen him for years. He looked really old now, but he still had that creepy look in his eyes. I could see that Emma was scared of him, so I picked her up. The whole time Martin and I didn't break eye contact. When we got home, I put Emma down and locked the door. She said that she was really afraid of Martin and that he hurt some kids. I calmed her down and assured her that she is safe with me. We then watched some cartoons and then Emma went to bed. Emma was asleep, so I called Steven to tell him that everything was fine and that Emma was sleeping. He just arrived at the hotel, and we continued talking over the phone. After about 10 minutes of talking, I asked Steven if the kids are still afraid of Martin, and he said yes. He also told me some strange things were happening in our town, so I asked what things? He said that 4 kids were missing and that he doesn't trust anyone anymore except me. I was really shocked to hear that. We continued talking for 5 minutes more, and then he said he needs to go to sleep and that he will check on me and Emma in the morning. After our conversation, I went on the internet, and I started to search news articles about the missing kids Steven told me about. It was true, 4 kids were missing, 1 boy and 3 girls. They were missing for over a month. Eventually, I fell asleep on the living room couch. It was 2 a.m., and I was woken up because I heard someone walking around the house and some clicking noise at the door. I went to the door and the clicking noise stopped. I looked through the window but I couldn't see anyone. Then I checked all the windows and there was no one outside. Then I went to check on Emma. She was sleeping. I went back to the living room and something caught my eye. I saw a shadow outside. I opened the front door and stepped outside. Someone was standing behind a tree in front of the house. I got closer to who it was and it was Martin. I got furious and told him to *K off, and if I see him again I will kill him with my bare hands. He just looked at me and smiled and then started to walk towards his house. I got back inside and went into the bathroom to take a shower and calm myself down. I was in the shower for maybe 20 minutes when I heard glass breaking. I quickly went outside the bathroom and I could see broken glass on the floor and Martin. He was trying to get inside the house. I started running towards him to kick his ass when I saw he had a knife. I grabbed his hand immediately and tried to take his knife from him. He tried to stab me a couple of times, but he didn't. He just cut my hands a little. After about 2 minutes of wrestling and punching him, he let go of the knife and I got on top of him and started to punch him in the face. Then I heard Emma screaming. I looked up. She was standing in front of me looking at me while I was punching Martin. I told her to go to the bathroom and lock the door. That is when I felt the worst pain in my life. Martin grabbed the knife somehow and stabbed me in the leg. He pushed me away and started running towards Emma. She was still screaming. I managed to grab him by the leg when he got up, and he fell face forward on the ground. I got on his back, grabbed his hair and started banging his head on the floor. After the second blow he was unconscious. I quickly grabbed Emma and my phone and locked us in the bathroom. I was bleeding really badly, so I put a towel around my leg and tied it tight. I called the police and explained everything to them. The police came 20 minutes later with 6 patrol cars. I went outside when I heard the sirens. Martin was gone. The police officer called an ambulance because I didn't mention I was hurt, and we stayed with him while the others searched Steven's house. 5 minutes later I heard something going on inside the house and I heard a gunshot. The police officers that were in the house came out with Martin. He was in handcuffs, and he was looking at the ground. When I saw him I fell unconscious. I woke up in the hospital the next day. Emma, Steven, my mom and dad were in the room with me. They all hugged me when I opened my eyes. The first thing that I asked was, "Did they catch Martin?" Then my mom looked at Emma and asked her if she could show her some toys in the hall. The 2 of them left the room. My dad told me that Martin was in jail and that the police went to his house. They found the missing kids and that they found evidence linking Martin to several murders that have taken place in surrounding cities in recent years. Martin confessed everything. Story 2. I Am Dead. Posted by Saren Unknown Soul. The story I'm about to tell is one that I can barely believe in myself. It all happened a few years ago, but I must reassure you, this is a true story. It happened when I was on a field trip to a college with my high school science class. I never really had fit in with most people, so on the ride there no one really wanted to sit with me. I got stuck with this nerdy kid named Daniel who kept on flinching when I moved. Eventually, they calmed down and kept staring at their phone. I thought they were waiting for a text or call from a friend, but nothing ever happened. I heard people talking about how Daniel never actually smiled. They seemed emotionless unless they were flinching. When we finally reached the college, my teacher told us our buddies would be the people we were on the bus with. I sighed and looked at Daniel. They were still looking down at their phones. I mentioned the buddy system, and all they did was a nod. Our tour guide started showing us around the college and showed normal things like the classrooms and dorm buildings. After a while, I lost track of Daniel, and when no one was looking, I went to search for them. I finally found them at one point going into a dark classroom. I followed because if something happened to them, I might get in trouble for not keeping an eye on them. The room was pretty dark, like I said before, but I noticed another door at the back of the classroom. Being the dumb teenager I was, I decided to check it out, thinking it was a closet or something. It was actually a door leading to some stairs. I went down the stairs and noticed writing on the walls. Scribbled on the walls were words like, "not alone," and "always watching." When I finally reached the bottom, I felt uneasy, and Daniel was sitting in the middle of this small room. The room itself was strange. It had walls that seemed like it was covered with tattered cloth or plastic. It smelled like dead fish, and again there were words scribbled on the walls. Some of which I could make out were the words, "not alone," and "always watching," as I saw before, but there were also strange ones as well. Like a different language or code. Of some sort. "Do you see it too?" Daniel looked at me, and I was obviously confused. Were they talking about the walls? Were they talking about the puddles on the floor? "You see the little girl?" I was confused by what they meant until they pointed at a wall. It looked like something invisible was writing on the wall. No, more like ripping lines into the cloth-covered walls. "I am dead," was written, and a childlike giggle followed. That's when I dragged Daniel out of there because I wasn't an idiot. Daniel and I have been friends ever since. I didn't remember that happening until a few days ago when Daniel reminded me about it. They told me they did some research on the college and found out it used to be a children's hospital. I will never forget the chilling child's laughter or the note she left. Story 3. I wonder if my wife suspects me. Posted by Andrew and J. Smith. I should wait until she is well and truly asleep, but tonight I just can't wait. At dinner I slipped some crushed up sleeping tablets into her soup, hoping she won't notice. It seems to work. As we sit on the couch watching some talent show garbage, I see her struggle to stay awake. First her phone drops to her side. She reaches to pick it up, but instead the momentum of her body causes her to crash into the couch, and into what I hope will be a deep sleep. I carry her to bed. As I lay her head on the pillow, I give her a small kiss. "I love you," she says to me in a mumble. I gasp before she turns and continues her slumber. With my wife out of the picture, I'm free to finish my deed. I entered the cellar to find the boy where I left him, lashed to the operating table. Bloodstains from precious victims pooled and dried around him. His mouth gagged. I lean in close. His fear was palpable. "Stay quiet, and I promise this will be over soon," I tell the boy. I don't even know his name. I take a razor and use it to make a small gash in his arm. Before he can scream, I put my finger to my lips and remind him of my promise. I then unbuckle his cut arm, releasing the wounded limb, making sure to get as much of his blood in the table and leather shackle as possible. I then undo his other restraints. First his other hand, then I point for him to release his feet. Once he is completely free, I use hand gestures to instruct him to redo his first hand restraint, as to make it look like he somehow was able to wriggle out of it at great cost. I sneak him through the yard and into my car. I have a medical kit and change of clothes for him that I bought from a thrift store. I try to get his name, but there is a language barrier that neither of us seems too bothered with. I drop the bow off at a police station a few towns over. I doubt he would go in, but I figure I would give him a chance. Illegals tend not to trust the police. I return home and go to bed. It's just after 4 and I have to be up for work at 7. My wife is still sleeping soundly. She will most likely wake with me, and once I've gone to work she will discover her latest victim has escaped. I pray he will be the last. I don't know how many victims there have been, but I know that because of me 2 of them have escaped. I don't know why she does it. I just know I can't bear to see her kill another child. It is a routine day at work. I return to see her car in the driveway. I wonder if my wife suspects me or that another one slipped through her grasp. Please God, let this one be the last. Story 4. I thought I was about to die. Posted by End This Nightmare. This story is 100% true and happened probably almost 2 years ago. I was 15 at the time, and everyone in my house was gone for the night. My mom and stepdad had gone out, and my brothers were all at friends' houses. I was pretty used to being home alone. I'm pretty fearless when it comes to scary things happening, but this night scared me. The sun had set. It was probably around 10 p.m. when I started hearing weird bangs coming from outside the house. I ignored it for about 20 minutes until it continuously got louder and more consistent. I finally paused the TV and just sat there listening. It was coming from all over the outside of the house. Literally every side. We have a security system that talks whenever one of our doors opens. For example, when our back door opens, it goes, "Back door open," so we always know when someone's entering the house. We've had some previous experiences with break-ins. Anyways, I'm sitting there terrified. I started texting one of my older brothers about the noises, but he told me that it was probably just a few drunks from the bar down the street. Eventually, I got so worked up, I called him. As we were on the phone, our alarm started talking. "Back door open." My heart immediately dropped into my stomach, and my brother had heard it through the phone. I started sobbing, and he yelled at me to go into his room, grab the knife from under his bed, and stay in his corner. He was already in his friend's car, and they were on their way. I was shaking so bad I could hardly hold on to the knife. It took them less than 10 minutes to arrive, and they immediately checked all over with knives and baseball bats in their hands. They found nothing, and when we reviewed our security camera footage, there was nothing. We still have no idea what the banging was or how the back door opened, but soon after, we purchased a dog. I'm still superstitious about being left home alone. Story 5. The Stalker. Posted by BAC90. It all started when I made a new friend. We will say her name is Jennifer. Jennifer and I became best friends, although it was kinda weird because she was the really popular, pretty girl in school and I was known as the lonely, creepy, outcast of the school. Anyways, we would spend all of our time together at school, and to be honest, I started developing feelings for her. We would skip class together and find an excuse to meet up during school, but for some reason, she was always too busy after school and on weekends. I thought she liked me too, until she started dating the biggest, most muscular jock I've ever seen ever. Like I'm talking, his arms were the size of sculpted milk jugs. Now I know what you might be thinking. Is the writer of this going to stalk this girl? And the answer is no. After remaining friends for a few months longer, she told me I was too depressing to be around and told me to kill myself. But that's another story that I will tell another day. It ties into the stalker story because the stalker showed up after she told me that. I very vividly remember the first night it happened. Those eyeballs looking through the living room window at 3 a.m. while I'm playing on my PC. Hearthstone, if y'all were wondering what I was playing, I turn my head, and I see these two eyes in the window. I remember thinking, is that just my reflection? And then I got up and walked closer. Mind you, I'm in my boxers at 3 a.m., home alone. So I got closer and my eyes blinked. They blinked, and as I got right up to the window, the flash of a camera went off and the eyes were gone. Fast forward about 2 weeks after that fateful night, I had to change my boxers. I'm in class. Now in my class, Jennifer, from earlier in the story, is sitting behind me. Her huge protein-packed boyfriend is sitting next to her. I can hear them whispering behind me. Her. I kinda feel bad for him. I understand why you told me to tell him to leave me alone, but he looks so miserable. Him. It's okay, I feel bad too now, but he was bringing you down, and you're happier now. I'm sure he will be okay. Her. Yeah, I hope so. But he should have a new friend soon, as long as the new girl in the back of the class keeps staring at him. Now don't get me wrong, Jennifer and her boyfriend weren't bad people. They may seem like it, but in all honesty, I was in a rough place, so I'm sorta glad she ended up getting happier with someone she truly loved. It was the new girl comment that got to me. New girl? What new girl? I don't see any. Wait, why does she look familiar? And for some crazy reason, it didn't click in my brain. I didn't make the connection yet. Fast forward a month. I've started noticing someone drawing my name inside hearts on desks and tables and even on my locker at school. I didn't know whether to feel weirded out or to feel good, knowing someone actually thought that I was worth liking. Now I needed to know who it was. That weekend, I went to a friend's house. It's about midnight on a Saturday, and my friend and I saved up enough money for a pack of cigarettes. It was a pack of Newports. And it was too cold outside to smoke, so we went into the bathroom, turned on the fan, and started to smoke. About halfway through my cig, I could have sworn I heard someone giggling quietly. My first thought was, how the hell is he laughing and smoking like, at the same time? And then he points it out, he says, why do you keep giggling? I told him probably about 100 times it wasn't me. We then heard a crash in the living room. We both rushed out. There was nobody there, but the back door was wide open. We looked at each other, and then I ran, shut and locked the back door, and then we barricaded ourselves in his room. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It's a picture of a girl with her face scribbled out, standing in my friend's living room, 2 days before. Now I was scared. I didn't know what or why this was happening to me. I showed my friend the picture, and he said, I know her. I went wide-eyed and asked who it was. He replies, isn't that the girl who came to our school not too long ago? I can tell by that jacket. I told him that there's no way of knowing that based on a jacket, but then, he starts laughing. I asked what's so funny, and he said, remember that girl I used to date back in middle school, that you met one time because she was from another school? That's her. He just keeps laughing and laughing. At this point I'm just dumbfounded. Not at the fact that it's his ex, but that she found out where I live and took pictures of me. The next day, Tuesday at school, I confronted her. I asked her why she was stalking me, and she just looks at me, clearly having no clue what I'm talking about. She claims she doesn't even know me. The stalker wasn't her. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I started staying in my room more, which has no windows, and locking the door. Nothing happened for a while. I thought I was free. But that's when I found it. A note. In my room. Saying, why do you try to hide from me? I just want you to love me as much as I love you. Just accept me. Meet me on the football field at 9 p.m. on Sunday. I did what any curiously terrified person would do. I didn't call the police. I went to the football field. Turns out the stalker, who was a girl, was one of Jennifer's ex-best friends who knew me from conversations she had with Jennifer. I guess she thought me and her were the same, and that the girl we trusted betrayed us both, so we were destined to be together. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I didn't freak out, I just stood there, and she hugged me and told me she knows my pain, the depression, the hate from others. She told me it's okay. And then she ran off. I just stood there not knowing what to say or do, and I never saw her again, never got any more notes or pictures or anything. The scariest part, when I asked Jennifer about her. Apparently, Jennifer's so-called ex-best friend didn't exist. Jennifer didn't know the girl. And neither did I. Story 6. The little girl named Alice. Posted by BAC90. When I was a child, probably about 5 or 6, I had extremely bad night terrors. I would fall asleep to the sound of my parents yelling at each other most nights, and would have night terrors and would sleepwalk and talk in my sleep. I remember often seeing shadow figures, usually in human form, around my house in the middle of the night. Fast forward to when I'm about 16, I started getting night terrors again. It got to the point where I would keep myself from sleeping because of the horror that awaited me in my sleep. So I'd stay up, and after a while of this, while already being depressed, I started becoming suicidal. I think my mind just sorta snapped one day, because I started seeing shadow people again, except not only at night, in the middle of the day, outside or inside, school and at home. One shadow person, in particular, started talking to me. She is a little girl and she said her name is Alice. We ended up talking a lot, and we became friends. In fact, at the time, she was my only friend. She knew this, so she told me she was going to get her friends to come to see me. After that, many shadow people would often be around me at once. I'm talking maybe a dozen or so in my room while I'm in there talking to Alice, just hanging out. I know none of this sounds normal, but it gets worse. I started hearing her voice even if she wasn't there. I started carving her name into things, on my wall, even into my arm. Yes, there is a scar of her name on my arm. My parents didn't know what to do, so they sent me to a mental hospital. I ended up sleeping in what was called the safety room. It was an empty room with only a mattress on the floor and a rubber ball in it. I got on meds and left the hospital about 2 weeks later. But the meds made me even more depressed and Alice's voice never left, but I couldn't see her anymore. So I tried taking my life. I took 30 extra strength painkillers and I honestly think I did die for a minute at least. My father at the time told me he wasn't going to take me to the hospital, and that I had to start making myself throw up the pills. After trying to throw up for about 40 minutes to no avail, I went and laid in bed, where I passed out. I woke up outside my body in my room. I could see my body, but I also saw Alice and several other shadow people around me. Alice told me I wasn't allowed to die yet, so she shoved me back in my body. I woke up and started vomiting blood. I sucked on ice cubes to try and get water in my system for a couple of days. I am now 19, and I still hear Alice's voice in my head. Whenever I feel depressed, she tells me I'm not alone, and that I'm not allowed or able to die yet, because she will just push me back in my body. I am much healthier now, but part of me still misses that form of insanity, the peace I felt knowing that the only things that existed were me, Alice, and my own mind. Story 7. She Came Back to Me. Posted by Unknown. I guess you could nail the start of this down to the 13th of December 2017. The worst day of my time in this world. The day I was pushed down the never-ending spiral of the helter-skelter that was to be my life. You guessed it. She left me. I can't say it ended well. For a big guy who puts on a tough guy persona, I cried a lot. She was everything to me and I just didn't understand how she could just leave me like that. I was angry. I wanted answers. Some form of closure. No matter how many calls I make, I always voicemail. No matter how many messages, not a single one was read. I was convinced that she was doing this just to hurt me. So I contacted her parents. Sam, her father said, "I'm sorry, but it's over. You are going to have to move on." But he didn't understand. How could I move on? He had never particularly liked me anyway. From the day she introduced me to him, he was always critical of me because I didn't come from money like them and I didn't get the best marks in my schooling. I pushed that all aside though because I loved her. A year went by and that day came around again. December 13th. In the days running up to it, I had begun to think about her again. Wondering where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. It had been your standard working day at my 9-to-5 job. Stacking shelves and such. when I looked up from my work and there she was, still as beautiful as the last time I saw her. I nearly broke down telling her how happy I was to see her, and how much I had missed her. "You missed me for all this time? You couldn't move on from what happened?" I took her hand and told her that whatever had happened between us didn't matter anymore, and that I loved her. I couldn't even remember why we split up anyway. We began seeing each other again, usually just once a week when we were both available. We would go to a movie or restaurant, or sometimes we would just hang out at her place. In a year, nothing at her place had changed. Same posters of various artists and movies, same carpets, same cock-blocking cat. My family told me I shouldn't be going over to her place. Told me it wasn't healthy to be seeing her again. Screw them. For the first time in a year I was happy again, and I wasn't going to give that up. I blocked them from my life in every way I could. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, hell, even LinkedIn. No one was going to come between me and her. She was perfect. She was all I needed. I stopped going to work just to see her. Who needed a job when I had everything I needed from her? We have been together again for half a year now. We mostly just spend time at her place, talking and talking endlessly and remembering all the good times together. She was always beautiful, always smiling and happy. I was happy too. So unbelievably happy. So much so I didn't even mind the rope burns around her neck. Story 8. Our mail woman is a nice lady. Posted by Knucklehead. Remember Sydney, our mail woman is a nice lady. Say hello if you see her. I could still hear my mom's voice like it was yesterday. I was almost 5 years old, and not yet in school. Dad was away at work and Mom had just received an emergency phone call from the hospital, where she worked nights. Ruth, my babysitter, was on her way over, so Mom was taking a quick shower. She had left the TV on, but my attention was mostly on coloring dinosaurs. Suddenly, a movement behind the thin white curtain caught my attention. I walked over to the window and saw the mailwoman unlatching the door to our backyard. Across the street, Mr. Sanders was watering his flowers while gazing into our yard. My 5-year-old brain didn't know it at the time, but the mailwoman was not a typical female. She was more a model than a mailwoman. Her form-fitting uniform emphasized her perfect feminine curves. Men on our street made sure they were outside doing various chores when she showed up with their mail. Our house was more secluded than our neighbors' houses, as it was at the very end of the block. Our large backyard had a high fence and thick trees which served as a guard from peering eyes. That had most certainly been what had drawn the mailwoman to our backyard, over all others. I watched her cautiously glance over her shoulder as she stepped through the gate, and carefully closed it behind her. She was quite uncomfortable, wriggling visibly as she hurriedly made her way along the side of the house. As she turned the corner into the backyard, I remembered my manners and ran to the back porch. Mom had told me to say hi. I was about to open the screen door, but the sight through the clear glass stopped me. She had pulled down her shorts and was now squatting on the grass, her back to me. I could just make out a pea stream flowing into the recently mowed grass and her naked but straining to maintain balance in the squatting position. It was the first time I had seen a girl or woman pee, and I had no idea they could go for so long. This must have been a real emergency, because she wasn't slowing down at all. The sound of Mom turning off the shower awakened me. I still hadn't greeted the mailwoman. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. She heard the door opening and looked over her shoulder in a panic. The sudden movement made her lose her balance and topple over with her pants still around her ankles. As I finished saying, "Hi, miss," I looked on in awe at her stream now clearly shooting into the air. Her pee was blue. Not just blue, it was a beautiful ocean blue. It was stunning, even beyond what I had seen at the beach. I couldn't believe my eyes. Blushing, she managed to stop peeing and quickly pulled up her shorts. I was terrified at what I had seen, but I couldn't move as she walked towards me with a sweet smile. "Hello, little boy." Her full lips spoke purposefully. What did you see today? Why you peed over there? I managed to stammer, pointing behind her. Her smile turned into a full grin, even her pearly white teeth were perfect. That's right, when a girl's gotta go, she's… well, you will learn all about that when you're just a wee bit older. She removed a glove and reached down to ruffle my already messy hair. Come on, give your auntie a hug and promise her to keep all this a secret. She bent over to pull me into her breasts. Do you promise, Sydney? I was surprised that she knew my name, but realized that she must have asked my parents at some point. I felt more comfortable with her now. She seemed nice. I had probably imagined the blue pea. I smiled and nodded as she broke off the hug. Okay, you are a good boy now. Remember, this is our little secret. She brought her finger to her lips and whispered, and walking away. I ran inside, just as Mom was opening the front door to let Ruth in. The next morning, there was a large brown patch on the corner of the backyard. All the grass had died. Mom took great pride in her lawn care, and she questioned Dad and I about what could have happened. Remembering my promise to the mailwoman, I said that I didn't know. Over the next few weeks, Mom and Dad did all sorts of work on the lawn. I noticed it a month after the incident, while playing with my truck one afternoon. Despite its tiny size, it really stood out as a green speck in a sea of brown. The landscaper came later that day, and Mom explained the situation from the porch while pouring him a glass of lemonade. I saw him walk over to the patch curiously and touch the dead grass. He returned to his truck to get a shovel and decidedly set the shovel tip into the soil. I could tell he wanted to get the weed out. With an approving grunt, he brought his foot down on the tool forcefully. The brute force drove him backwards, as he struggled to use his plant leg to regain balance. He failed to do so and landed hard on his backside. Unfortunately, the powerful momentum continued to push him backwards. I watched in shock as his head made a hard, direct impact with the iron railing on the porch. The man's screaming was replaced by an even eerier ringing as his body ricocheted off the metal and crumbled in a heap at the edge of dead grass. Mom heard the loud clang and ran outside to discover the motionless body. Crying, she ran towards the landscaper and asked him if he was okay. Fittingly, the incident brought on nearly a week of cloudy, rainy weather. The patch remained brown, except for the weed. It grew bigger and now sported blood-red leaves in addition to its stem. Finally, a fair Sunday arrived, and Dad decided to take another crack at the patch. From talking to a farmer friend, he had determined that the contaminated soil needed to be removed and replaced with fresh, potting soil. It was tedious work, but Dad was a hard worker. Plus, I was there to help him. Together, we dug out soil using our little garden tools and transferred the soil into garbage bags. As we got closer to the middle of the patch, we discovered thick roots which were quite difficult to dig through. It soon became clear these roots belonged to the weed with red leaves, a surprising revelation since the weed was still quite small. With an amused chuckle, Dad crawled to the weed and placed a gloved hand around it. He yanked to no avail. His other hand joined the effort, but the stubborn plant didn't budge. Frowning now, Dad stood up and bent over to put 2 hands on the weed again. Something was different this time. I sensed a danger in the air. He pulled at the plant with all his strength, but it didn't budge. I yelled at him to stop, but he didn't seem to hear me despite being only 3 feet away. Crying now, I tugged at his arm. Please let go, Dad! He continued pulling unabated. I had never seen such intensity in his eyes before. He glared down at the demon, cold and unrelenting. This wasn't my father anymore, it was something fierce and obsessed. Then it was all over. He gasped audibly and released the plant. His right hand shot up to his chest as he fell to the ground. He clutched his shirt desperately, struggling to breathe. I tried to catch him as he approached the ground, but his weight overpowered me. His body landed with an audible thud as he kicked forcefully to try to overcome his internal struggle. I just avoided contact from his heavy leather boot as I ran towards the back door, crying for Mom. He was dead of a heart attack well before she could get to him. We did the only logical thing left after the funeral. Mom took me to live with my grandma, 200 miles away. We mostly left the house as it was too painful to pack things up. Dad had good life insurance, so we were okay for money for a while. It turned out Mom was pregnant. I soon had a little sister named Angela. We lived simple lives. Mom got a part-time job as a home care nurse and Grandma took care of us until she died. After receiving her childhood home in Grandma's will, Mom put our old house on the market. The house got some interest, despite its unkempt condition. When Mom told me that we were going back to open the house, so the realtor could show it around, I immediately begged her not to do it. "Don't be silly, Sid. We need to sell it to get money for your education. There is no other way," she retorted. How was 11-year-old me supposed to convince her not to go back? That I didn't need to go to college and neither did Angela? That no amount of money was worth going back? I knew how silly I sounded. I was in a cold panic when we pulled into the familiar driveway. Mom unlocked the front door and took a crying Angela into the washroom for a much-needed toilet break. I had to go too. It was just how we had left it. Not really cleaned up, but at least there were no perishables and garbage. Everything looked different now, maybe because I had grown taller. Or maybe it was because it had been so long since. I shuddered as memories of Dad came flooding back. I walked towards the bedrooms to use the other washroom. I looked out at the backyard and almost wet my pants. A giant shrub full of bright blue flowers highlighted the corner of the yard where Dad had died. The stunning blue color, which I had only seen once before in my life, had come from the mailwoman. That abruptly brought my thoughts back to my full bladder and I ran off to the washroom. I had to hurry and get back to Mom. I was relieved to hear my mom's voice as I stepped out of the washroom. The realtor had arrived, and they were chatting out on the front porch. I relaxed a little and decided to take a quick look at my old room. After all, I would probably never see it again. Maybe there was something I wanted. I kept a keen ear out for Mom's voice as I sorted through my old belongings. There were clothes, toys, and an old family album. My eyes moistened as I skimmed through photos of Mom, Dad, and me. He hadn't even known about Angela before he had died. She would never know her father, at least I had gotten that luxury before I had seen him die before my eyes. I sniffled and wiped my eyes. I closed the album. It was too painful to continue. In horror, I realized 5 minutes had passed and the voices had disappeared in my reminiscent haze. I bolted out of the room in a cold panic. There was no response to my yelling, "They must be outside." I rushed to the back door, trying to open it with shaking hands. I couldn't see anyone out there yet. The damn door was stuck. Time was of the essence. I sprinted for the front door, trying to listen for any voice at all. As I crashed through the door onto the front porch, I heard faint voices to my right. Thank God. I turned the corner to see Mom and the realtor walking along the side of the house towards the backyard. I fumbled with the gate and barged through. They finally heard me and turned around. I ignored their judgmental stares and continued to charge towards the backyard. I got to them, out of breath and out of my mind. "Mom, we can't go back there," I gasped. I grabbed her hand and doubled over, trying to catch my breath. "Sid, it's okay. We are just out for a stroll." I cut her off, as I straightened up in a sobering panic. "Angela. Where was Angela?" "M.O.M. Where's Angela?" Mom stared and pointed towards the backyard. "No, not the backyard." I staggered forward, pushing the women out of my way. I was out of control and I tripped over my own feet as I saw my baby sister walking forward towards the blue flowers, mesmerized. "No!" I yelled. "Angela, stop!" It was hopeless. She was hypnotized just like Dad had been. Mom saw Angela just as she touched the flower. A giant coiling branch violently emerged from the plant and wrapped itself around my sister, yanking her into the green and blue maze. Mom managed to get to the plant before her daughter was completely engulfed. She desperately clung to Angela's arm, trying to get a hold of the powerful serpent-like stem. The thorns dug into her skin and she screamed with pain, but not yielding in her battle to get her daughter back. The realtor had fainted behind me, and I finally regained enough sense to get back to my feet to try to help Mom. The plant sensed my presence and forcefully whipped Mom back in my direction. I managed to catch her and prevent her from crashing into the railing like Dad had, but Angela was gone. The arm disappeared, and Angela's screams stopped. A pool of blood spread from underneath the shrub before being absorbed by the brown earth below. A few minutes later, the realtor woke up on her own and dashed away without uttering a word. Mom and I were in uncontrollable tears. We could not believe that little Angela had also now been taken from us. Mom's hands and arms bleeding quite badly from her valiant struggle with the thorny plant. I bandaged them up as best as I could, but deep inside, I knew the damage was already done. She had a fever by nightfall, grew rapidly weaker in the coming days, and died in her sleep. I knew I had to give her to the plant. It had to be that way. The plant had taken my family. Mom should be with my dad and sister. I brought her out to the green grass one last time and thought about her love for tending to her yard. I heard the door to the backyard open and shut. A few seconds later, the male woman walked to the plant and plucked off 2 gorgeous blue roses. She was still as beautiful as ever. "Sorry for your loss," she said, handing me a flower. "Thank you," I replied, accepting her offering. The thorn pricked my finger as I touched the deadly beauty. A drop of blood dripped down to the wood planks at my feet. "You know this plant won't kill you, right?" She grinned and raised an eyebrow as she looked over. "Yes, unfortunately." I felt my eyes well up again. She had made sure to touch me, so I couldn't be hurt by her creation. Only I could have destroyed the plant, and I had been too foolish to know it. She got up to place her rose on Mom's chest, then turned to leave. Tears ran down my face. I felt like she was all that I had left. The only thing I'd look forward to from now on would be the mail. "Rose?" "Yes?" She turned to look at me. "Will you make sure I get buried here? When will my time come?" She giggled. "Of course, Sid, I'll always love you for keeping my secret." I waited until it was dark before placing my own rose on Mom's chest. Then I pushed her body into the plant. Story 9. A Last Message. Posted by Unknown. It started with the dogs. Arthritic dogs, unable to move, lay in vets' offices around the world, needles filled with pentobarbital empty and shaking in the doctor's hands. Dogs with mangled legs dragged themselves alongside the highway. News reports showed video after video. One dog, a German shepherd I think, missing half of his head after being hit by a semi, threw himself over and over again against his owner's door. The video cut out soon after, but you could see a little girl through the window. She couldn't have been older than 5, with curly hair and chubby, tear-streaked cheeks. When the dog saw her, he began hurling himself even more fervently, and you could see the girl's father pull her away from the window and close the curtains. I stopped watching the news after that. These dogs should have been dead, and technically I guess they were. Their hearts stopped beating, their skin rotted around them, but they were still there. They still whimpered and barked. The ones that were able would wag their tails. Before long, this phenomenon spread to birds, bugs, animals, anything alive. Unfortunately, this included humans. In Mexican culture, it is believed that the souls of the deceased will be with us until they are forgotten, after which they will pass on to the afterlife. Turns out they didn't know how right they were. Being dead is painful. The more lucid ones were able to describe it. The more painful and messy your death is, the more desperate you'll be to move on. So desperate that you'll do whatever it takes to be forgotten. There are footsteps coming from overhead and a voice calls down, melodic and rough. "Honey? Baby doll, it's me. You can come upstairs, it's safe, I promise." I shudder at the sound of my mother's voice. "I promise I won't hurt you." There's a pause before an animalistic scream rips through the house. "Please! Please! It hurts, it hurts, it hurt dash." I plug my ears. That's not my mother. She isn't my mother. I saw her. Once. By the time my father turned, the government had given up on finding a cure and instead focused on survival, well, their own survival at least. My father came back from a food run one day and by then he was too far gone. Crescent-shaped indents were scattered around his face, and chunks of flesh hung down like streamers at the world's most fucked-up party. He sobbed and begged for us to kill him, and when he realized we couldn't, he begged us to forget him. I stood silent and shaking. Blood caked his fingernails and stretched up his forearms. Jesus Christ, he did that to himself. He begged us to forget, but of course we couldn't. It's hard to forget when your father is standing in front of you dead and screaming. Blood leaked from his eyes, but there were no tears. He can't cry anymore. It was the smallest detail, but I couldn't help but notice. A flash of silver caught my eye. Mom. He raised his arm. The world seemed to go in slow motion, while all of reality came crashing down on me. I tried to look away, but it was too late. I had seen what I'd seen and there was no going back. Nevertheless, I turned my eyes to the carpet while my mother's blood speckled the carpet like rose petals at a wedding. My mother. The woman who sat on the floor with me and ate ice cream while I cried about a boy whose name I can't even remember. The woman who knew when I faked sick to get out of going to school, but still made me chicken noodle soup anyways. I turned and ran. The door was 10 feet away. 10 feet. 120 inches to freedom, but I got there, and I couldn't do it. I know you're probably screaming at me. I could go out that door and live my life. Nobody knew me. No one would remember me. By the time I was born, all of my grandparents had succumbed to some ailment or another. Of course, the neighbors must have known that the Petersons had an agoraphobic daughter. News travels fast in a town like ours, but they surely didn't remember me enough to bring me back. Hell, they probably don't even remember my name. I could go outside and be perfectly safe. My hand trembled as I grasped the doorknob, while my mom rose behind me. Fuck. I can't do it. I turned once more and almost ran into what used to be my mom. My father hadn't just killed her, he had broken her. One eye was burst open, and fluid poured out like a red, veiny egg yolk. Parts of her were gone. The heel off one foot. A toe off the other. A whole section of skin was torn off her back, and through it you could see parts of her spine, shattered into dust. She had been slit through from her neck to her navel, and I could almost imagine the heart that had once beat there pounding along to my ragged breaths. She lunged at me but stopped short. Her lower leg had been attached by mere threads, and now there was a soft sigh, like the tearing of silk, before it bent to an unnatural angle and she collapsed against the wall, knocking down our meager collection of family photos. I saw something in her eyes. A flicker of the woman she had been just 5 minutes ago, and I snapped out of my trance. Now here I am sitting in our basement. It smells musty, there's only one light, and if I were a character in a horror movie you'd be screaming for me to get the hell out. But this isn't a horror movie. There's no ghost to sprinkle holy water on, no serial killer I can just outsmart, and there sure as hell won't be any shitty sequels. The only thing that's real right now are my shaking hands, the footsteps upstairs, and the dead child still in my womb. Even if I had made it outside, how long could I really last with a thing that wanted to kill me growing inside my body? 8 months. It's been 8 months and 14 days to be exact. God, how stupid was I that I thought I could bring a baby into this world. I was naive and hopeful, and most importantly, I wasn't alone. Now I am. I met a boy once, back when I would still leave the house. He didn't mind waiting until 11 at night to go to the grocery store, because by then it was mostly empty. He was never annoyed by my fears, but still, he never once pitied me. We were going to get married. We were going to have a real wedding at a real venue. Therapy was going great, and I could mostly manage my anxiety by the time I found out I was pregnant. He was elated and I was absolutely terrified, but I knew that we could do it. Together. All it took was one phone call for the world to come crashing down on me. It was a truck driver. He wasn't even drunk. Just fell a little behind schedule and thought he could make it a bit longer before he turned in for the night. He got a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, I was shattered by grief. For a while I truly hated him. It festered inside of me like a scab I just kept picking at. It made me a bad person. I turned mean and reckless. Soon I stopped leaving the house. I quit therapy and stopped trying. A month after the accident, I found out he had hung himself with a bedsheet. The fucked up part was that I had forgiven him. I was learning to heal, and part of healing was forgiveness, but it was too little, too late. My hands are shaking as I type this, but I know this is the last option. I can already feel her waking up, tiny hands pounding on the sides of her temporary home. I've spread gasoline along the concrete floor of the basement. In 5 minutes or so I'll light a match. After all, there's nobody to remember me. I can finally have peace. I know I can't delay this much longer. The movement in my stomach is getting stronger, and the slow, long wail is becoming less muffled. It's time for me to end this. Mom, Dad, I know you won't see this, but I love you. One day, you two will move on, and when you do, me and my baby girl will be waiting for you. I think I'll name her Zara. It's Hebrew or maybe Arabic. I can't remember, but it means new beginning. This isn't the end, and I hope you'll understand that. Don't worry, I'm not scared anymore. Story 10. Abandoned County Hospital. Posted by Hacksaw70. Exactly what it says. For 3 summers the first worked in an old county hospital that my buddy's uncle owned. It was without a doubt the worst time of my life, as I worked completely alone until around the end of my time there. There's plenty of history between this building and I, which if it interests people enough I'll divulge, but I want to focus on a specific story. Prior to my employment there we spent 2 nights in the building. This will cover the second night. It was my buddy, names changed for privacy reasons, Chris, my brother Luke, and I. We brought a video camera with us, and we rode ATVs around the property for most of the day before entering the building. Once we were in the building we set up our base camp on the 3rd floor in a day room. Basically, just open space where the people could hang out like a common area. The 3rd floor was a medical ward which housed a hospital unit, and one of the thickest doors I've ever personally seen. At least 4 inches thick, with only deadbolts to open and close it, along with an observation window and nurse station for just that room. Gives me chills just thinking about it. Anyway, we set up camp, then work our way through the building, filming as we go. We worked our way through the building in about 2.5 or 3 hours, and it's around 10:30 to 11 o'clock by the time we're back at base. It was about then we heard a tapping noise like metal opening and closing. On a calm, windless night it didn't seem like this was possible, but we wrote it off as a wind trap in a nurse's station. We gathered sleeping bags and our sodas and chat before Luke looked at us and said, "Guys, I can't do this, I'm really uneasy, I want to go." Well, Chris and I were like, "Okay, that's fine, we'll take you down to the car, you'll be safe there." Escort him down, get greeted by the German Shepherd on guard duty, and head back up. We get back up and settle in. Chris can fall asleep anywhere instantly, something that he said was a hell of a skill once he joined the army. But it's important, as I couldn't sleep at all. I could hear the pup wandering around outside before he laid down outside the window. Clear, calm night, we could hear his nails on the cement all the way on the 3rd floor. Then suddenly he got up and started growling and barking. My heart has never ever beat that fast. I slowly got up and peered out the window down, and I could see the pup looking back up at me growling. Talk about a heart-stopping moment. I kicked Chris and told him what was happening, and he said it was normal and to go back to bed. Cool, here I was thinking we might get killed. I took a few breaths, crawled back into my sleeping bag and tried to settle in. I was down for what felt like no more than 10 minutes when I sort of woke up. I checked my phone and it was about 12:30 when I heard the most gut-wrenching sound of my life, something I will never be able to explain or forget. A loud, unending scream that didn't echo. I would have written it off as an animal, but midway through whatever it was screamed, "Oh fuck, please stop." Then as quickly as it started, it ended. I could feel my fingers trembling but white-knuckled around my knife. I barely managed to call out to Chris, who didn't respond. I so badly wanted to leave but couldn't force myself to move. I swear I didn't sleep, but eventually, daylight broke and I was up and packing immediately. I woke up Chris and we went down to the car. I asked Chris about it, and he said he hadn't heard anything, but Luke had just as weird of a night. He said he could see shadows moving in the surrounding areas of the building, but every time he turned the car lights on to check, they were gone. He said it happened multiple times before he just closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Needless to say, I have absolutely no clue as to why I decided to work there after all this, but if you'd like to hear more about creepy/scary moments from my time here, let me know. Story 11. The Good Mother. Posted by Dazed. My name is Lucy and I'm a mother of 2 children. I'm one of the best parents of all time. I say this since my children never act up or anything. They don't really bother much of anyone, like other kids do today. So many kids are doing drugs and having sex. Well, my Jim and Abby don't do any of that stuff. They don't ever get into trouble, which is the best thing ever, honestly. Jim is 14 and Abby is 13. Abby is my favorite. I love to play with her hair as she sleeps. It's probably the best thing to mess with your daughter's hair while she sleeps. She's been asleep since I gave her that special meal I gave to my son when he turned 3 so he wouldn't become a bad kid. But he started to smell and rot, so I had to cut him up and bake him into a pie. I fed it to my husband. He didn't like it. I told him what was in it. He freaked out. I don't know why it wasn't that bad. I mean, he will never be a bad kid ever, so I think I did a good thing. But he didn't think so. He tried to call the cops. I might have freaked out and stabbed him with a knife. He's in his chair right now where he's always been. He sure is skinny though, I don't know why. It's weird, I always try to give him food to eat but he never eats it. I had him in his room in his chair. Our daughter accidentally walked in on us doing stuff a few months ago. But it was okay. I gave her some of that special food earlier that day, since I found a condom in her room. That's bad and I can't have a bad child. I gave her that special food. After she screamed, she fell. I ran to her and put her in her room and she's been there ever since. It's alright. She's okay. I'm the best mom. My kids will never be bad kids. Story 12. Working next to the morgue. Posted by the Behar Paladin. Just some background info. I am an electrician in South Texas. I've worked all over Central and South Texas doing electrical work and have seen some out of the ordinary stuff. This instance specifically, I wanted to share my story about working in one of the oldest functioning hospitals in my town. This hospital has 2 buildings, the original building from the early 1900s, I believe, and the newer wing. I have no idea how new. I was working in the basement of the old building. This building was all but vacated save for the library on the 3rd floor, which there are stories from there too, and the basement which housed the morgue. The area I was working in was a small set of offices along a dimly lit hallway with the old maintenance room at one end and the double doors to the morgue at the other. The guy I was working with took me down there, lined me out on what to do and took off, presumably because he hated it down there just as much as I did. We had brought our tools and materials down on a dolly that converted to a low 4-wheeled cart. It had my toolbox, a couple of boxes of material and a 6-foot ladder on it. The vibe was already pretty creepy when I noticed how quiet it was down there. I had hoped that was because it was slow, which meant hopefully nobody's home, pun intended, but I really didn't know. Trying to stay optimistic, I hummed to myself as I worked, sorting through wires on a rack to cut some lengths off, when I heard a sort of metallic thud behind me. I quickly about-faced to see my cart kind of jostled about but not moving. Rightfully freaked out, I shoveled the cart up against the wall, as it was between me and the stairs out, and cautiously returned to my work, humming louder. Then, the doors open next to the morgue, which I just find out lead outside, and a couple of guys push a loaded stretcher into the doors. I shudder as I regain my sanity, having already been freaked out. Again I return to my work, vocally singing now. A few minutes pass and the hairs on my neck start to go down, and I damn near mess myself as I, again, hear the metallic thud, this time much louder, followed by an equally metallic creak. I slowly turn to see the cart, one end lifted, and as I square my body with the hallway ready to bolt to the stairs, the cart drops, making the thud again. My feet hit the stairs before I noticed the lights had gotten really dim, and there was a banging sound coming from the other side of the morgue doors. I made the other guy go get the cart. Story 13. Help. Posted by Modern Superpig. Hi, I've just gotten this app on my phone because I need help. For your sake, I'll start at the beginning. So one day I was following my normal routine and nothing was special about that day. So like always, I went on my normal walk, and in the middle of the park where no one ever visits, I found this pile of dirt, almost like it had been dug up. So I decided to investigate while looking around to see if I could see who had dug here. I found a shovel out of the way, almost like it was hidden. I didn't think much of it at the time and left it be. 1 week later, someone had hung themselves near where I found the shovel. Scared, I headed back. I needed to know what and why someone had dug there. I found the shovel. It was nowhere near where it was before someone had moved it. Not thinking about it, I picked it up and started digging, and soon I had hit something. I pulled it out. It was a box, but for some reason I felt sick being near it. I began to open it, which is something I still regret, and inside was a USB. I picked it up, then passed out. I woke up to whispering. I was in my house miles from the park, and in front of me was the USB and a note saying plug me in. And for some reason had this urge to do so. Once I did, all my lights in the house started flickering on and on the USB a file saying demons. I opened it, all the lights turned off, and 500 files were in the one file in order from 1 to 500. With stupidity in my veins, I opened file 279 and threw up. On the file were pictures that made me feel sick. After that, I took the USB out and put it in my attic, locked the door, and hid the key. But now I have consistently had the same nightmare about the same thing. I can't sleep, and every day I hear constant moaning and crying. Can someone tell me what Demon 279 is, please? I'm losing my sanity. People try to tell me it's fake and even taunt it, but 3 days after they all end up dead. I'm scared. I don't want to die, but this thing makes it hard to live. I don't want to call a priest and make it worse. Why would God leave me? Story 14. There was a man in the store who wouldn't leave. Posted by Ignorant Slut. To give you some sort of idea of how the store I work at looks like, imagine a big square warehouse. At the very front of the store are the front lanes, entrance and exits, and at the very, very back of the store is the electronics department. Once you walk down past the front lanes going down towards the market, there's a big walkway that leads down to electronics, and you could see some of the book aisles, but that's about it. 2 nights ago I closed. We close at midnight on weekends, and we were pretty short-staffed. Many people called out, and one of those people was supposed to be in the toys department, which is right across from electronics. Usually toys and electronics are pretty busy, but that night there wasn't really anyone shopping around these departments. There are call buttons that guests could press that will notify the team members where service is needed. 45 minutes before the store closes, I have to put all of the Apple products away in a smart cart and bring them to the stockroom in the back rooms/warehouse. As soon as I unlocked the stockroom, I started to feel extremely uncomfortable. I've been there before many times, but for some reason it felt like there was someone waiting around the corner of the stockroom to scare me. I pushed the cart in, locked the door, and walked quickly back to the department. As I was approaching my work area, a call button started going off. Service needed in electronics. Who is responding? But as I was walking towards the call button, I Didn't hear or see anyone around. Mind you, I was pretty close to the call button, so I don't think they could have walked away that fast. I cleared the call and turned around to grab a few carts when the call button went off again. Service needed in electronics. 30 seconds remaining. Who is responding? I cleared the call, so I was a bit confused as to why it was still counting down, and the fact that I turned my back for not even 2 seconds and the button went off again kind of scared me. I cleared the call and went back to work. After that, nothing really happened. 10 minutes before the store closes, everyone is supposed to clear their department by walking down the aisles and checking for guests. I was walking down the toy department when I noticed there was a guest looking at board games. His back was facing towards me, so I didn't get a good look at him. I told him that the store closed in about 10 minutes, but he didn't even look at me. He just mumbled something and started walking away. 5 minutes before the store closed, I was walking back up to the employee's room to clock out when I felt like there was someone walking behind me. I turned around and there's no one there, so I disregarded it. Suddenly I heard one of the Apple alarms going off, and since there was still some time left, I kind of ran back to electronics to turn it off, but noticed that there was no one coming from the department. I did another quick walk around toys and electronics, and saw the same man standing in the exact same aisle where I told him 5 minutes before that the store was closing. I reminded him that he needed to make his way up towards the front, and he just raised his hand, back still faced towards me, and walked away. I followed him to make sure he was walking to the front, and once I reached the employee's room, I just walked in and figured the front lanes would take care of it. Midnight. The store was now officially closed, and I was one of the last people to walk out of the employee room. I'm walking up towards the front when I just so happen to look down the walkway that leads to electronics when I see the same man walking down the book aisles towards the toys. This time I yell, "Sir!" and start running down the walkway to catch up to him, but by the time I get down to the book aisle, he's disappeared. I literally walked through both departments to check if he was there, but I didn't see him. The Apple alarms go off again, so I walked back to them to disable it, and hear boxes falling in the direction where I had previously told the man that he had to leave. Of course, I walk down and find a huge mess of toys on the ground but don't see anyone. I started yelling, saying that the store was closed, and he had to leave. Apple alarms go off again, but I was too scared to walk out of the aisle into electronics, so I ran the opposite way towards the front of the store and notified the team lead that there was a man in the store who wouldn't leave and was causing a mess. She told me to leave and that she would take care of it, so I just went home. Today I walked into work and the security and team lead from the other night asked me to come into their office and show me the footage from 2 nights before. The footage showed me talking to absolutely no one. The man was not on footage at all. The camera footage shows me pressing the call buttons, walking away, and coming back to clear them. The footage shows me setting off the Apple alarms and disabling them. The footage shows me knocking down the toys and running away. I am completely shocked and don't know what to do. Story 15. The Camera. Posted by Mr. Midnight 6. My wife, daughter, and I moved into a nice home an old couple was renting back in 2015. The elderly couple were very nice and asked for a reasonable amount for rent in a nice neighborhood, allowing us to walk in and look around. After seeing how beautiful it was, we accepted their offer. They informed us the house came equipped with a security system just in case of emergency, and they will cover the fees. Once we moved in and settled down, we were all delighted to be there. Months went by without any incident besides a couple of false alarms from the security system. We loved it there. One night in particular I could remember late at night when my daughter woke up crying, running to our bed. She said she saw the shadow of someone outside. Right after she told us the security system sounded off. Getting up and checking my phone, there was a problem with the window sensor in my daughter's room. Running over and turning on the light, nothing was there. I checked the window and it was securely closed when I received a phone call from the security company to check on us, and we told them we were fine and they shut off the alarm. I calmed my daughter down and told her she could sleep with us that night, and she gladly did so. 2 days later, when we went out for dinner, I heard my phone ringing, and upon checking, it was the security system again telling me the living room motion triggered there might be someone in the house. After hearing that, I told them to dispatch the police, and I will check the interior cameras on my phone to see. Checking the camera, I saw something that would send a cold chill down my spine. I would see a dark shadow walking slowly behind the couch and disappear out of the camera's view. Freaking out at this point, I calmly told my wife we have to go. Returning home, police surrounded the area and asked us for the keys to the home so they could check inside for intruders. After 30 minutes, they came back out telling us no one was inside and nothing was out of place. My wife, feeling uneasy and unsure about staying in the house, I pulled her aside and told her what I saw on the camera. Giving me a funny look, she didn't believe me and thought an intruder somehow managed to break in without setting any window or door sensors off. I called the security company and scheduled an appointment to have everything checked, and as I suspected, everything was working properly. A couple more days would go by without anything unusual until again at night my daughter started screaming for us. Jumping up and running over, jiggling the door knob that was locked, she kept screaming, saying, "He is going to get me." Panicking, I kicked the door in. Opening it and turning on the lights, I saw my daughter crouched on the corner of her room with her covers and pillows on her. I checked around with my gun drawn. No one was in there besides my daughter. Putting my gun away and picking my daughter up, who was sobbing uncontrollably, and she said she saw her stuffed bear moving, to which she fully woke up. Then she saw a shadow standing on the far back corner of the room, walking slowly to her, to which she began screaming. Calming her down and walking her back to the master bedroom, my phone began to ring. Answering, a representative informed us a motion downstairs in the living room picked up activity, and if any of us were down there, to which we ran in our room and locked the door, telling the lady, "No, we are all up here," demanding she dispatched police immediately. Checking the camera, while all of us looking on my phone, we couldn't see anything. Once I placed it in night vision mode, we could see a silhouette of a man moving slowly back and forth, suddenly disappearing out of the camera's view. My wife and daughter, scared to death at this point, told them I was going to go check it out. My wife refused me to step out and go downstairs. I told her I would be fine while loading my gun, and suddenly the door started shaking violently. Pointing my gun, telling my daughter and wife to cover their ears, I fired off 2 shots. The door stopped shaking and I heard police sirens outside. Giving my gun to my wife and instructing her once I stepped out to immediately close the door behind me, locking it so I could let the police in downstairs. Doing so, looking around, running downstairs and letting the police in, they began searching around. They heard the shots as well, fearing the worst, and led them up to where my family was. After explaining multiple times what happened and what we saw, the police didn't believe us. Since we didn't have saved footage of what we saw and had to go through getting court documents and paying a lot of fees so the security company could release the footage, which could take weeks, we just decided to move out the next day, not wanting to stay in the home any longer. Packing up and explaining to the elderly couple what had happened and what we have seen, they didn't seem surprised at all. Letting them know I will pay for any damages I caused the night prior, but they didn't accept any money. Telling them we were sorry many times, they understood and accepted the keys back from us. When the U-Haul truck was loaded, the old man said, to which I can remember clearly, "This is the 3rd time this happened to us this year. I wonder what is so bad about this house." After thanking him one last time and shaking his hand, I got in the truck, driving off, never looking back. Story 16. Sailing Beyond. Posted by Flard. When I was 26, my friend and I decided we were going to sail around the world. Ambitious? Yes. Stupid? Yes. As I type this, I am 3.5 years into this journey, with an estimated 2 weeks until I reach home base. I'm not sure if I will make it. I'll sum up my life story thus far in 3 short sentences. I was lucky to have a nice family growing up, and we lived by the water and loved to sail. After college, I realized I wasn't very happy with myself and needed direction. I thought I'd find answers on the open water, or something like that, so me and my best friend set sail. Samuel and I had saved up a lot of money ever since we were teenagers. We bought a yacht together, aka a tattered 35-foot boat that was built in the 1960s with a nice motor and huge sails. It took some work to get it going again, but was worth every penny. We had plenty of food, clean water, water purifiers, medicine, flare guns, solar generators, batteries, a pro GPS, all the essentials. We also have a nice satellite thingy that Sam set up so we can have Wi-Fi on board. It only works about 10% of the time, truth be told, but if you're reading this, it means it's done its job. The past 3.5 years have been, interesting. Some weird shit has happened, but I don't have time to type it all out now. The only thing of importance now is surviving the situation I'm in, and creating this written record of what happened. It started a couple of hours ago. Like I said, I'm about 2 weeks away from California, where we started our journey, going north away from Mexico and the Pacific Ocean. A few hours ago, Sam and I were sitting out on the boat's deck sipping some champagne, celebrating the fact that we were in the home stretch. The stars, my God, the stars were beautiful. You really can't get a better view of them than from the middle of the ocean. We were quietly admiring them. We had talked so much in the past 3 years, but the silent moments we shared were the ones I remembered most. Like that moment we were in then, silently watching the stars at night and sipping some bubbly. Or the first morning we set sail, we didn't talk for almost 2 hours as we watched the sun rise. As it first appeared as a red blob climbing over the ocean's end, Sam was strumming "Here Comes the Sun" on his guitar. The salty wind was hitting our face and I thought, this is it. No looking back, this is the beginning of this whole journey. I thought about these moments and more like them, but I was broken from my daze as I noticed Sam had stood up from his seat, rather quickly, and was staring off into the dark horizon. "What is it?" I asked. "I thought I saw a flare." I looked out in the same direction he was and waited. A couple seconds passed, then a skinny, barely visible streak of red appeared. It was a couple miles away, maybe more. Sam turned to me. "Flare?" I nodded. "Flare. Let's go. Now." "Got it." I ran to the controls and started up the engine. We turned the vessel sharply and darted over in the direction it came from. We were traveling fast, for sure, but not at an unsafe speed. Our boat rocked up and down, and side to side as we traversed the rough waves. Sam and I probably sailed for 10 minutes, or so without seeing any more flares, and no sign of any other vessel in front of us. "Should we keep going?" Sam asked. "Just a little longer, I think." So we did. But this is where things took a turn. No, not a turn. A turn implies the driver is still on the road. No, things didn't take a turn. Things drove off a fucking cliff. "Whoa! Slow down!" Sam yelled at me. I slowed down significantly. "What is it?" I see something, not sure yet. Can't make it out." We continued at a slow, steady speed, keeping an eye out. I could see what he saw soon after he pointed it out, but I couldn't make it out. A buoy maybe? Some scrap from a ship? We approached closer. Wait, no, it's too skinny. Except on the top. Oh, it's a sign? It's a sign, no. It's a stop sign? Sam muttered. It was about 10 feet higher than the water's surface. It stood perfectly still as the waves crashed around it. The octagon was red and weathered, and covered with rust. But the white letters reading, "Stop," in the middle were unmistakable. How is it not moving? It was almost as if its pole was stuck in the ocean's floor hundreds of feet below us. "What the hell?" I said. "I don't know, man. Let's turn around." I agreed, because I didn't like whatever vibe a fucking stop sign in the middle of the ocean was giving off. We turned, passed by the sign once more, and sailed away. We were silent again, but not like before when we were sipping champagne. We weren't thoughtful, reflecting, or anything like that. We were scared. I could tell he was. I was. But why? It's just a stop sign. Right. Nothing spooky about that. Just weird. Just odd. Out of place. We continued on for a while, not speaking, until I made a remark about the water. Wow, the water has really calmed down. These waves are baby waves. Seriously, Sam confirmed. This is the quietest the water has been in months, maybe years. He was right. But a chill crept up my neck when I realized how quiet it really was. It wasn't just quiet, it was growing quieter by the second. 20 minutes before, the waves were roaring and crashing into our boat, but they had weakened to small splashes. Then that had diminished into the faintest sounds of water moving, like a small creek. But then it was silent. There were no ocean sounds at all. If any of you have been out on the ocean in the middle of the night, you know how dark the water is. It's basically black. The only definition of the waves comes from the moonlight, and you can faintly make out where the waves break and crash. Well, as the sound diminished, so did the waves. The choppy black water had grown stiller, and stiller, and stiller. And now it still is. It was black. It was flat. It looked like there was no ocean. There was no reflection from the moon or stars anymore. There was nothing beneath our boat but darkness. Sam turned to me. He didn't have words, but his petrified expression confirmed that I wasn't going crazy. We both moved towards the side of the boat's deck and looked down, where the water should be. Looking straight down was an odd experience. You know when you look up in the sky, and your eyes go to the furthest possible focal point they can? Well, this seemed to go beyond that point. There was nothing but darkness, and I couldn't find an end to it. Sam grabbed my arm. What is this? What's happening? I'm not S. I turned to him. But then I noticed something far worse. He was no longer backlit by the moon. There were no stars behind his darkened figure. The only light came from our boat's lamps. There were no stars. There was no moon. There was no water. There was only us and our vessel. There was nothing beneath us, and nothing above us. The ship no longer rocked back and forth with the water's current. It was perfectly still, absolutely motionless. We floated somewhere in space and time, I know that much. But I had lost all direction. I felt like I was losing my sanity too. I had an odd out-of-body experience then. It was like I was a mile away from where I stood. I could see the small light emitting from the boat far off in the distance, and surrounding us was nothing but darkness. It looked like we were floating somewhere in outer space, a part of the universe void of any stars or light. I came back from that vision and gained some composure. What does the GPS say? I asked. Sam ran over to the navigation system's display. It says, his eyes were locked on the screen. He didn't finish his sentence. What? What does it say? It says, he paused again without looking up at me. It doesn't know where we are. That's impossible. You said that GPS works everywhere. Everywhere on Earth, yeah. That gave me pause. What are you saying? He still looked at the screen. He ignored my question and asked one of his own. I'll never forget his words. Does it feel like we are falling to you? No, I started to say, but after he asked that, it did kind of. Before, it felt like we were floating on stagnant water in complete darkness, but now, I felt that drop in my stomach. My heart was beating faster. It felt like I was lighter, like my feet were barely putting any weight down on the deck's surface, like the boat was about to fall away and leave me behind, floating by myself in the dark. No, I reconfirmed, though I wasn't sure what I really believed. It could have been my imagination. I didn't want to accept the fact that we were falling. Falling into what? No, I said a third time. We aren't falling. It's just dark. It's messing with your senses. We looked off in the same direction, first towards where the horizon would have been, then down where the water should have been, then up at the starless sky. We had nowhere to go. I was unsure if the motor would work, or if the sails would be of any use. There was no wind, and I was sure there was no water. We were sailing on an ocean of emptiness. What came next was something I never experienced before, so I may have trouble explaining. That feeling that we were falling was gone. It had been replaced by a feeling that we were upside down. I don't really know how to describe it. At first, we were upright, not falling anymore. But then, we were turning, no, flipping. It felt like the whole boat was capsizing, turning over very slowly. It kept turning over, and then stopped once I felt like we were perfectly upside down. It was still completely dark. There had been no change in scenery to indicate we had turned upside down. Nothing on the boat shifted at all. It was just a feeling. Like in outer space, there's no real up or down, but I'm sure an astronaut would be able to feel if they'd been turned upside down. And I could tell Sam felt it too. He turned to me with eyes wider than I'd ever seen them. We didn't say a word to each other. Our locked eye contact was broken by light above us. It slowly appeared, but it was obvious that it was stars. It was the stars and moon in the sky once again. "Oh, thank Christ," I said. But as Sam and I looked upward, I realized we weren't actually looking at the sky. We were looking at a reflection of the sky. It had a slow, rhythmic motion refracting the light in a strange way. Then I realized we were looking at water. I looked overboard and saw that beneath us was the night sky, beautiful and bright now, unmoving, and above us was the ocean, daunting and dark, but reflecting every star off its surface. We were upside down, or we were still upright, and everything else had flipped. I turned to Sam, whose expression matched my own, one of shock and confusion, but the word confusion doesn't do the situation justice. It was beyond my ability to comprehend something as a human. He looked at me. His expression had turned to sorrow. He looked like he was about to burst into tears that second. "Help," he whimpered. And with that one word I watched my friend fly upward, flail and scream for 10 agonizing seconds, then splash into the dark ocean above my head. He fell, I thought. He fell. He fell up, or down, into the sea. But I didn't fall. I looked up at the now rough waves and waited for my fate to be sealed, but nothing happened. Not yet. I ran into the cabin and began typing this out. I had come to the conclusion that I was going to die, somehow, and soon. I wanted my experience to be written out for someone to read, so someone knew what happened to me. I got about halfway through it before I heard the noise. It was a long, slow, loud, and deep rumble. It almost felt like a light earthquake. It slowly got louder and louder until I couldn't ignore the fact that something was happening. I peeked outside the cabin door, cautious not to go all the way outside. I looked up at the ocean, where I deduced the sound was coming from. The waves were bigger now, rougher too. Those black monsters would crash into one another and produce a light shower of white water. That's when I noticed it's closer. It was, indeed. The water was maybe 1,000 feet above the boat when I first noticed it. Now, it was more like 250. And that distance was decreasing fast. I stared at it, stuck in a panic of confusion and fright. It was falling on me. Or I was falling into it. And it was happening rapidly. I ran into the cabin again for shelter, knowing it would be little help. Seconds after I secured the cabin door, the ocean fell onto me, or I fell into it. The surface of the water crashed down hard onto the ship's deck and quickly began flooding the cabin. I think the boat was fully submerged underwater, for a second at least. I felt the pull from it as it brought itself back to the surface, trying to float. And I don't know how or why, but I knew I was upright after that. I'm not sure if the boat flipped itself or maybe a wave helped flip it over. It all happened so fast. I don't know, but I knew I was upright then, floating in the ocean. I got beat up pretty bad, whiplash, bruises, a couple cuts, maybe a concussion. My boat got beat up worse though. There is about a foot of standing water on the deck. The engine is completely wrecked, possibly beyond repair. The sails were torn to shreds from the impact of the water. But I'm floating upright. That's good. But I'm floating, wandering with no control over my direction. That's bad. And that's where I am now. I'm not sure what happened, or where we went wrong. I'm not sure if I'll ever make it home. I'm not sure if anyone will ever actually read this. My GPS isn't working anymore. God knows where I am. I'm just hoping this internet thing Sam set up still works. God rest his soul. All I can do now is send up a couple flares and hope someone rescues me. I just want to go home. It's still so dark. Story 17. I shouldn't have moved in with my boyfriend. Posted by Larvardavik. My boyfriend and I have been together for around 2 years now, and I finally decided to move in with him. We get along extremely well, and for the most part, I am fully happy with my decision. I only regret that I didn't move in sooner. Well, that was then anyway. Now I'm starting to regret it altogether. You know when you find out something about someone, and it completely changes your opinion on them forever. Well, this is exactly what happened. I'll start from the start, I guess. I moved in about 6 months ago. His house was fairly clean and tidy, and it was honestly perfect for the two of us. We were closer than ever. After the first few nights, I began to look around, not really snooping through his stuff, more just like seeing what he had really. Of course, it was nothing too unusual. But one day, during my investigations, I found a box under the bed. It looked old, like he had it pretty much his entire life. Jackpot. I dragged the box from under the bed and rummaged through it. It was full of old journals, photo albums, toys, and other random books. I got out one of his journals. There was a smudged label on the front. I couldn't even make out what it said, but my guess is that it was just his name. I opened it. It was his diary from when he was a kid, and on the front page, like every child would write in every diary, it had "Keep Out" written all over it. I chuckled to myself, and continued on to the next page. On the page, in that sloppy, giant handwriting that every kid had, the entire page had exactly one sentence on it. I saw a pretty girl today. It was written in 2000, when he was about 6 years old. I found it quite funny and cute. If the entire journal was like this, I was definitely gonna read through all of it. I wasn't really too sure if he'd want me to go through his stuff, so I pushed the box back under and kept the diary for myself. I continued to read it throughout the day. The entire diary was all about this girl he saw. He'd always write about her skin, and how amazing it was. How beautiful and smooth it looked, and how perfect and soft her hair was. I got it when he was 10 years old. He was still talking about the girl. For years after he first saw her. He was 6 years old. I didn't really think much of it. Probably just a crush at school which seemed to last extremely long. The diary lasted all throughout his teenage years. I was reading through maybe the 4th or 5th entry of when he was 14. It kinda creeped me out. It was just paragraphs upon paragraphs about this girl. I'll get her one day, it said over and over again. Each time it was repeated, it seemingly got more aggressive. I was more worried than ever at this point. Who was this girl, and what the hell was he planning to do? I continued reading up to the most recent entry. It was from 6 months ago. I finally have her trapped. She's mine, and she'll be mine forever. Forever. She won't be going anywhere. Finally, I get to have her all to myself. Her gorgeous skin will finally be mine. I heard the front door unlock. I'm home, babe. Story 18. The Hangman. Posted by Scaredy Cat. I just fell into bed, face first. After a 5-hour trip, I was way too tired to unpack my things or anything like that. This house on the edge of a small town is the place where I was supposed to stay for the next year. A few moments before, I was walking around the furnitureless living room and the huge adjacent white kitchen with the floor-to-ceiling windows, trying to get used to the place, to imagine what it would be like to live here, but I failed. My body began to ache. No more energy to ponder, to get settled, to install myself, just the unrelenting desire to lay there motionless and unconscious. Trying to fall asleep, shreds of thoughts rushed through my mind. My family inherited this house a month ago from my weird uncle. I always wanted to do a student exchange, and the college in this town looked just awesome. So, since no one in my family wanted to live here and selling the house wasn't a priority, it was just a practical decision for me to stay here for the coming 2 semesters. Now, what do I mean when I say weird uncle? Well, there's a lot that I could tell you about my uncle. Not firsthand though, since my uncle liked keeping with himself and rarely showed up to family gatherings. I only remember seeing him like 4 or 5 times. So, all I know consists of rumors and old family anecdotes, but there's a bunch of those. I could tell you how he was interested in occult stuff and the paranormal, how he wrote several books about those topics, how he was a member of several cults, how he was repeatedly hospitalized on account of severe schizophrenia, and how my mother cried when she spoke of him. But the weirdest thing about him was not how he lived but how he vanished. For my uncle did not die, not that we know of. He just disappeared. The reason we inherited his house was that after 2 years, he was declared legally dead. My family, for the most part, has had enough time to mourn and to move on. Only my mother wasn't quite over it, which nobody blamed her for. He was her brother after all. Anyhow, here I was, trying to doze off in this huge empty house. Even though I was really tired, I couldn't fall asleep. Was it because I felt uneasy in this house due to the aforementioned circumstances? Or was it just the fact that I always have had trouble sleeping in new places? I tried to shove aside any unsettling thoughts and sleep. I was lucky as the wind was softly blowing through the trees outside. This has always had a calming effect on me. The whispering of the branches, the rustling of the weeds and bushes, all kinds of flowing and crackling frequencies, an owl in the far distance, so relaxing. But there was something else. Inconspicuous at first, but the more I focused my attention on it, in which I have no choice, the louder it got. It was some sort of periodic, petty small sound which broke the wonderful, softly floating chaos of the night. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It sounded like a creaking, a heavy, old, wooden creaking. The whole house was quite modern in style, and I couldn't think of anything here emitting that sound. It had to be something in the garden or in the neighborhood. Who cares? I just wanted to sleep. Stop thinking about the weird sound and focus on the nice sweet. Damn it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Even though my body was crying from exhaustion, I had no choice but to get up and check what it was. Maybe there was an easy way to make it stop. I lifted my aching body out of the horizontal position, went to the window and opened the blinds. As I saw the source of the sound, my heart stopped. I screamed violently and fell backwards onto the floor before I could even consciously compute what I saw. For there, in the backyard, was a man hanging from the old tree, swaying in the wind. Within a millisecond I was more awake than I have ever been in my entire life. I couldn't see the man's face, just his dark figure levitating outside my window staring down at me. In a thunderous panic, I got up and ran outside my room and into the kitchen from where I could access the backyard. While on my way I was able to formulate some thoughts. The man needs help, I need to get him down. I must call the paramedics. I ran past my phone. No time, get him down first. I picked up a stool from the kitchen with one hand, tore open the glass door to the backyard with the other, and ran outside. It took me a few seconds to realize that the man wasn't there anymore. Confused, I stumbled around the yard, shaking, breathing heavily, not knowing what to do next. Maybe he fell down and is lying somewhere, I thought. I walked around, looking in every corner, behind every little bush in the small backyard, the stool still clutched in my hands. I peeked into my neighbor's yard and saw nothing. I called out, "Hello?" The sound of my own voice sent a shiver through my spine. It made the whole situation more real. Nothing. I stopped. As I tried to catch my breath, I looked at the old tree. It wasn't very tall but dark and evil looking. Even though it was almost summer, it only bore a few leaves. It looked like a mean old creature towering over me, its branches like the legs of a spider or the fingers of a witch, reaching out in every direction. It felt like it was watching me, like it saw me as an intruder. A gust of wind blew through the yard, making the grass move and cooling my head. Maybe I should go back inside, I thought. I turned my gaze towards the house. I could see the kitchen through the huge windows. It was dark with some shapes standing there, furniture, a vase, a bread basket. Suddenly a humanoid shadowy figure moved out of the darkness across the room and out of my sight. I jumped. Fuck. He's inside the house. Slowly I started walking towards the glass door, my heart pounding. I entered with the stool clutched tightly in my hands and raised above my head, ready to strike down whomever I planned to save with it only a moment ago. I turned on the light. Everything was quiet. I walked through the hallway, into the living room. I checked everywhere, the closets, the bathroom, behind every curtain and even under my bed. There was no one there. Was it just my imagination? But it felt so real. Should I still call the police? I went back into the kitchen. I set down the stool, standing there completely out of tune and with an empty mind, not knowing what to do or think next. I turned my head and there on the fridge a weird occult symbol was painted in red. It consisted of 2 overlapping circles and some strange signs. Below some words were written in the same red paint. It said, "My house." I stood there for a second. No time for any reaction when all of a sudden something grabbed me from behind, throwing me on the floor with brute force. It dragged me across the kitchen floor and out into the backyard. I kicked and screamed in panic. Even though I could not see it, I could feel that it must have been strong as an ox. My hands were bound behind my back. I felt something around my neck choking me, and the next moment I was hoisted up from the ground high into the air, my feet kicking into nothingness, incredible pain starting to swell up throughout my body. When I came to realize the situation I was in, it was already too late. I was hanging from the tree in my own backyard, slowly suffocating. I felt myself go. This was it. This is how it ends. My vision became blurry. Darkness slowly covered me. The last thing I could see was my bedroom window. Somebody was looking out of it. His face was running white with sudden terror. It was me. Story 19. I don't recognize my family. Posted by Jebo123. I'll keep this short, but I am seriously freaking out. When I woke up this morning, I headed upstairs to grab some breakfast from the kitchen. There was no one there, and as I ate, I sat there on my phone, hanging out. Everything seemed pretty normal, at least as far as I could tell. That changed when I heard the footsteps. You know how you can tell who's walking down the hallway or whatever based on just footsteps? When you've really been living with your family for a while, you begin to pick up on the way they walk, and it becomes second nature, at least it did for me. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, but they sounded truly off. It's hard to explain, obviously, but I immediately noticed it. I looked up, just as my sister walked into the kitchen, greeting me with a head nod. My stomach dropped. She was the right height, same hair color, whatever else, but she was definitely not my sister. I didn't recognize her at all. This was a stranger walking nonchalantly around my kitchen. Before you say this is dementia or whatever, I'm 17. My memory is totally fine. The girl asked me if I wanted anything from the fridge, where she was standing, door ajar. This whole time, I was staring, mouth open, trying desperately to figure out what the hell was going on. She looked back, an amused smile on her face, head tilted to the side, as if she was asking what was wrong. Then a heavy-set man clambered in. He told the girl off for keeping the fridge open, and with a roll of her eyes, the girl pressed the refrigerator door closed. Then he turned and asked me what the hell my problem was. I guess I looked pretty stupid, staring like that, but my head was not processing anything. I was confused, of course, but also horrified. I jumped up and immediately ran down to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. On the way, I pushed past an older woman, Mom, who was adjusting some furniture. She glanced up as I sprinted past her, but she had that same amused look on her face. I swear to God I'm tripping. What the hell is going on right now? That's where I am now. Confused as hell, terrified beyond belief. Imagine if this had happened to you. I feel like I'm living in a horror movie. I've always been a paranoid person, but I swear I don't know who these people are. My phone buzzes. Subconsciously, I check it. The text from Dad reads, "Sorry we left so early. Your grandma was sent to the hospital, so the rest of us left while you were sleeping. We were all up by then anyway. We'll be home in a few hours. Your grandma is fine." Just then, a knock on my door. A man speaks. "Come upstairs. We have a surprise for you,"